E-bikes are basically motorcycles according to a law that just passed in New Jersey, and it's only the beginning of something much bigger. So I'm going to tell you what happened, what it means for e-bikes, e-mountain bikers, and for kids. We'll discuss edge cases like private roads, rail trails, and out-of-state riders. We'll discuss how it affects selling your e-bike and transferring ownership, what actually happens if you ignore the rules, and we'll talk about the silver lining. A few really good things happened here. So, what actually happened in New Jersey? Well, during his final moments before leaving office, New Jersey Governor Murphy signed Bill S-4834. Simply put, e-bikes are motor vehicles just like mopeds and motorcycles in every way. The Class 3 system we're used to no longer applies. That means your grandma's hybrid e-bike requires insurance and a registration. To ride it, she needs to carry her driver's license and wear a DOT-approved motorcycle helmet. She needs a front and rear light and at least one rear view mirror. But that's not all. She needs a license plate affixed to the rear. I made a replica of a New Jersey motorcycle plate for reference. This is 4 by 7 inches. If you are riding any e-bike without this, the law says your bike could be impounded. You could get points on your driver's license, or you could get it revoked altogether. If you're really determined, you could keep missing court dates and go to jail for doing something that was completely legal yesterday. To again clarify, there is no curb weight, wattage level, or classification that gets you around any of this. Whether or not you have a throttle, a speed limit, or pedal assist, it's irrelevant. This legislation classifies a 250-watt e-bike with torque-sensing pedal assist more like a 600-pound Harley Davidson than it does a bicycle. And because mopeds aren't allowed on bike lanes, rail trails, or greenways, neither are e-bikes. So even if your e-bike is like a European pedelec limited to 15 miles per hour, you must ride it on the road 100% of the time. Now that's what the law actually implies as of today's date. So it remains to be seen if they backtrack on any of this. Because actually, the law takes effect July 19th, 2026, and as of right now, it's not even possible to comply with. Bicycles don't have 17-digit VIN numbers, few insurance companies have policies for e-bikes, and the majority of New Jersey's 10 million residents don't even know this happened. So, it's possible this date will get pushed back multiple times with grace periods. Now, several other states are considering legislation that would affect e-bikes and even traditional bicycles. But so far, we've only referenced public roads in the US state of New Jersey. What about e-mountain bikes? In New Jersey, many state parks allow e-mountain bikes on their trails, and many of those bikes are carried on racks and never touch public roads. So of course, nothing has changed there, right? Negative. It also applies to EMTBs on public trail systems. You need a registration, insurance, a license plate affixed to the rear, and a DOT-approved motorcycle helmet. You need mirrors, lights, reflectors, and I'm not even slightly kidding. I had to double check this and I can't find a way around it. That's what the law implies. And so we'll have to see if there are additional clarifications here. After all, how likely is it that police departments have the time, resources, or willingness to enforce any of this? That remains to be seen, but the law states you can get your bike impounded or even lose your driver's license if you ignore this new reality. So regardless of how defiant and rebellious you fancy yourself, you can lose your license, which in New Jersey would make you pretty much stranded. The late George Carlin famously referred to New Jersey as the toll booth state. Now, of course, private land is another story. If you are truly on a privately owned trail system, you're good to go. Even if there's a parking lot, which is a quasi-public space, nothing has changed on private land. So next, we'll talk about kids. And actually, things have barely changed for kids, which is ironic because the very thing that prompted these laws was kids riding illegally on high-powered electric mopeds. That was where the public outcry stemmed from, and rightly so. I wish they did something about that, but apparently they didn't. Okay, so before this legislation, 15 and 16-year-olds needed special permits, registrations, and insurance to ride mopeds. Let me make that clear. Since 1983, so for 42 years now, 15 and 16-year-olds have needed special permits to ride mopeds legally in the state of New Jersey. That is still the case. You cannot legally ride a moped on public roads without that permit, and you can't get that permit until you're 15. So I'll say it another way for a third time to clarify. Before this legislation, riding a 1500-watt Timu moped without a permit, registration, or insurance was breaking the law. So where the confusion stems from is that the media often calls those e-bikes, when in fact, the law never considered those e-bikes. So nothing has changed for 15 and 16-year-olds, the age group most involved in the accidents and tragedies the legislation sought to prevent. What has changed is that children below the age of 15 can no longer ride e-bikes legally in public. For what it's worth, they did make it illegal for children to ride e-bikes in the street, and the parents can be held accountable even if an accident did not occur. Whether you agree with this or not, it's the only part of the legislation that even pays lip service to the original source of the public outcry. And so with that, let's move on to the edge cases, and this is where things get really interesting. Let's say your grandmother lives in a gated community, Dune Bluffs in North Jersey. She's inside the community and she wants to ride her pedal assist townie to the clubhouse. This actually isn't an edge case, it's crystal clear. Title 39 5A-1, in New Jersey, police can enforce state traffic laws on private roads. Will they? That remains to be seen, but your grandmother would technically be an outlaw. How about this one? You live in Pennsylvania, 1 block from the New Jersey state line, and you want to ride your e-bike to your friend's house. Well, New Jersey has a reciprocity rule where they honor out-of-state registrations and licenses, just as if they were issued in New Jersey. But Pennsylvania doesn't have registrations or insurance for e-bikes. So if you want to ride your e-bike into the state of New Jersey, your only option will be to obtain a non-resident license plate and registration. You'd also need a New Jersey compliant insurance policy. Wow. All right, how about this one? You're at a bike shop considering the purchase of an e-bike. A good bike shop will normally let you rip around the parking lot to make sure the bike fits. They would now need the equivalent of a dealer plate, like a used car lot uses for test drives, and in many instances, this could apply to the parking lot. Now again, how much of this actually gets enforced is yet to be seen. I'm just telling you what the law currently implies. And so, while we're talking about the weird stuff, what about buying or selling an e-bike? Well, first of all, the law includes a 1-year online sales ban of what used to be considered mopeds and electric motorcycles. I know that's a mouthful, so I'll clarify. Those 1500-watt AliExpress fat tire bikes, you can't buy those online for a year in New Jersey. If you do want one, you'll need to get it in person, presumably so that someone can explain the law to you. But curiously, the law doesn't say anything about what was previously considered a Class 1 e-bike. So I'm assuming you can order an e-bike from Trek, Cannondale, or whoever, and it'd be up to you to get it registered. But when I reference buying and selling, what I'm really getting at is Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp. How does that work? Well, as I understand it, you should register your e-bike before you sell it. Because in order to sell a motor vehicle in New Jersey, you would sign the back of the registration. If you buy an e-bike without this, it's kind of like buying a vehicle with a bad title. It becomes a pain. And you would need a bill of sale, which includes the sale price, date, and the serial number. The law also requires the seller to provide the buyer with the official Motor Vehicle Commission registration forms. It all makes my head spin, but I guess that's what you would have to do if you were buying or selling a motorcycle. So, in summary, it just got a lot more complicated and costly to buy or sell an e-bike in New Jersey. But many of you are wondering why anyone would comply with these laws. I mean, who's going to enforce them? What if you just pretend this isn't happening and go about your business? We touched on this, and according to the comments on the last video, it seems that's what a lot of people intend on doing. You should consider the following. Before this bill passed, it was actually pretty difficult to tell the difference between an e-bike, a moped, and an electric motorcycle, at least from far away. Now, it's not even necessary to tell the difference. It's now easy to enforce. But is it actually worth enforcing? Well, yeah, now this could actually be considered a revenue source. And that brings me to a harrowing thought. Let's say you lock up your e-bike in front of a supermarket and there's no license plate on it. Please explain to me what is stopping an authorized towing company from cutting the lock and charging you an impound fee. Saying I don't consent to you confiscating my e-bike isn't going to pay your $250 impound fee. And if the Facebook legal counsel thinks that's a good idea, they can try it first. Speaking of someone taking your e-bike, that brings me to the silver lining. Because believe it or not, this law contains some kind of excellent implications for e-bike riders. Let's start with theft. Previously, stealing an e-bike was pretty easy and worthwhile. But as we touched on, buying and selling e-bikes in New Jersey now requires a lot more documentation. You'd be stealing something with multiple paper trails going back to the original owner, so at the very least, stolen e-bikes are now more cumbersome to unload. Now, this won't stop professional thieves, but it could stop casual ones who don't want to deal with all that. For what it's worth, this disincentive could absolutely be considered a good thing, but it doesn't end there. Astonishingly, e-bike riders are now legally defined as pedestrians for personal injury protection purposes. Back in 2024, a ruling in New Jersey effectively allowed insurers to deny payment of medical bills to e-bikers hit by motor vehicles. So victims were left to either sue the driver or rely on their own health insurance to pay their medical bills. Now, e-bike riders have bulletproof protection under the law. But there's one more silver lining, and it's kind of a stretch to even call it a silver lining. We can finally have an honest conversation about e-bikes within the cycling community. In certain circles, you were labeled anti-bicycle if you so much as questioned any part of the Class 3 system. But it's a system the general public does not understand. I'd venture to guess that fewer than 1 out of 100 people have those 3 classes memorized, and even fewer could actually tell the differences in real life. Particularly in circles where e-bike advocacy is a thing, it's nearly impossible to have this conversation. It's over. It's the law. Why would we even entertain the possibility of backtracking or changing any of this? Nobody's interested in hearing your concerns. Concerns like, what are throttle switches doing on bicycles? Couldn't that backfire? As far back as 2017, I've gotten into scuffles for simply stating there is a difference between a bicycle and an e-bike. And the e-bike utopia these crusaders promised did come to fruition, complete with huge monstrosities with token ornamental drivetrains and throttle switches. And as online sellers leveraged the confusion to market not just e-bikes but electric mopeds and motorcycles, the headlines started stacking up, all including the word e-bike, because normal people can't tell the difference. You can blame lazy journalists and negligent parents, but if you need a technician or an expert to physically verify whether something is a bicycle, a moped, or a motorcycle, someone's gonna step in and make it simpler. They did. Bill S-4834 is blunt, and it punishes people who had nothing to do with the problem. But it does simplify the difference between a bicycle and a moped. This might be a good chance for certain advocacy groups to revisit their framework for e-bike policy. Maybe bicycles should, I don't know, have adjustable seats and working drivetrains? Maybe they should be possible to pedal. Maybe what we often refer to as pedal assist is actually pretend to pedal assist. Is that what we want for bicycles? Again, I'm not anti-e-bike, and I'm certainly not anti-bicycle. I'm not even anti-Suron or Talaria or any kind of motorized two-wheeled vehicle. But if we want a prayer of having the kind of bicycling infrastructure that is commonplace in Europe, we need a simple definition for our version of a pedelec. In most of Europe, only one kind of e-bike is legally treated like a bicycle, and it's called a pedelec. Pedelecs are what you might call pretty lame. They're limited to 250 watts, they only have pedal assist, and they stop assisting you at 25 kilometers per hour, which translates to 15.5 miles per hour. Anything else is a moped. On the other hand, American Class 1 e-bikes are 750 watts, 3 times as powerful as pedelecs, and they cut out at 20 miles an hour instead of 15. Yet, it's likely that if we had just stuck to that, Class 1 e-bikes, this situation wouldn't have transpired. So I'd like to encourage bicycling advocacy groups, no matter who is funding you, to decide what an e-bike actually is. It should be one thing. It should look like, behave like, and meld nicely with traditional bicycles. It doesn't have to be lame, It just needs to make sense because those lame pedelecs in Europe are a whole lot cooler than what's happening in New Jersey. If we can have a conversation about this with respect, civility, and compromise, perhaps I won't need to make this video again next year about 5 more states. I'm not trying to make everybody angry, I'm just saying out loud what many of us have known for years. Thanks for riding with me today, and I'll see you next time.